today, after careful consideration, we're ready to confirm that the situation is no longer an emergency. Therefore, the federal government will be ending the use of the Emergencies Act.
There you have it. Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau confirming his use of the Emergencies Act is over now that Ottawa is trucker-free. However, some suspect that Trudeau may have made the announcement because Canadians are withdrawing money from banks in astonishing numbers after the Emergencies Act granted the Canadian government the right to freeze bank accounts.
Oh, great. A run on the banks. Well, Rav Arora, a writer from Canada, recounts the reach of those bank freezes through the story of a single mother who donated only $50 to the convoy and had her account locked. Rav Arora joins us now to discuss. Welcome, Rav. So tell us more about this story and what is unfolding. You're there in Canada. You're experiencing everything that's happening. Tell us what's going on.
Yeah, so Trudeau has now revoked the Emergencies Act, and it's quite bizarre. I mean, it was shocking that he invoked it in the first place, and on Monday, he said he would extend it, even though protesters had left, for fear that they would come back again or that there was going to be some future issues going on in Ottawa. But now he says that he's going to revoke these powers, and I think, you know, broadly speaking, this is just a big wake-up call here for Canadians, seeing how quickly a free society can just descend into full-on, like, tyranny once enough fear has been propagandized to the public for, you know, the unvaccinated to start, and now for these protesters who are deemed, you know, Nazi sympathizers, far-right extremists, etc. And so I interviewed a few people on the ground, including one individual in the article who's a local owner in Ottawa, and his family immigrated from Chad and Haiti, and so he went to this protest. He brought his mom, who worships the CBC, the state-sponsored media organization in Canada, and she was so shocked to see how friendly people were. She was like, "I'm being told something else in the media, but here on the ground, people are so friendly, joyful, loving. They're cooking food. Kids are playing on bouncy castles. This is not the far right extremist hysteria that's being sold in the media."
And so how does this end up working, particularly like for the woman that you wrote about? So she gave $50 to support the protest, and then she goes to withdraw money or goes to like make a payment, or there's an automatic payment maybe set up, and just she gets denied access. And what does somebody in that situation do at that point? Like, is there a review process? This is just so kind of dystopian and Kafkaesque.
Yeah, I wish I had the answer to that question. I unfortunately do not. My local member of parliament here, Mark Strahl, he tweeted this out. He didn't give her last name. He didn't provide specifics because he didn't want her privacy to be violated. And we haven't been given any more details other than that. But I suppose there's some good news that now they say that the banks will unfreeze those accounts that were initially frozen. So there's that. But the Ottawa police chief did still say that the investigation on those deemed to be involved in the protests will continue for months after the actual protests occurred. So that is still something that is quite dangerous, I think, in terms of government overreach.
Yeah, do you think this is something that's going to stick in people's minds for a long time? This very unprecedented new kind of form of cracking down on protesters. I mean, obviously we see, you know, there's police can go after protesters, that sort of thing, but this is fairly new to say, no, if you're donating to a protest, you're going to be doxxed, you're going to have your accounts frozen, all that kind of stuff. How are people dealing with that? This is going to be like I think this is going to be a new kind of front in the war on civil protesting.
Yeah. You know, a lot of Canadians on the left, on the right, including myself, have been shocked at how the difference between a free Western democracy and a full-on authoritarian regime is not as big as we would like to think. Like, it didn't take much, right? And it didn't take a lot. And Trudeau, I mean, he's deeply unpopular here. A recent poll showed that his support has likely been cut in half. And I think just for the future, as future variants of COVID come, it's possible Trudeau might invoke, these powers again more and more with other things if more protests occur, or crack down more on, the unvaccinated. Currently, still, we have the unvaccinated in Canada who can't leave the country or travel within the country because of the federal mandates, and people even working from home, like a woman I interviewed who works at a bank, but she works remotely and she has natural immunity. She had to get vaccinated in order to work for her job, even though she's at home. So I think all these things that Trudeau has done has kind of culminated with what's happening right now. It's been slowly kind of gradually building up to this, first with the mandates and then the federal mandates that took place, and then incentivizing provinces to mandate vaccination. And now ultimately here we're seeing with the protests just how eerie and ominous this government overreach has been.
Well, Canada has also implemented another layer of government overreach, and I want to get to that regarding free speech and fining people for hate speech. But before we go there, one thing that I'm curious about is the goalposts almost have moved, not just for the Canadian government, but for the protests as well. It seems like, originally these protests were about mandates and cross-border mandates, also inter-domestic travel mandates and mandates for jobs, like you've mentioned. But then because the government cracked down so heavily on these protesters, it switched, and it's almost now everybody's relieved that, well, at least they got rid of the Emergency Powers Act rather than discussing the point of the protests, which were the mandates. And I get it, because the government came in and they cracked down harder and harder and harder. And then it was like, well, we need that to be, that's now wrong, and that's now wrong. And now we're kind of protesting these other things as well. So where is everybody at with the mandates? Is everybody just like, okay, now we've won because the Emergency Powers Act has been removed?
No, I'm actually a little bit optimistic, dare I say, with what's happened, because with the protests, this is getting not as much coverage as it should. Various provincial leaders have said that they're going to lift vaccine mandates now in their provinces. So Quebec, Ontario, Alberta, they've all announced that they're going to lift their vaccine mandate program in some cases in March or April. And even in Quebec, which is kind of shocking to me, because there right now, the unvaccinated cannot go to Walmart or Costco. And there's so many bizarre and dystopian regulations surrounding that. But even there, they've said that, okay, the vaccine passports no longer serve any kind of public health purpose, because as many people know that double vaccination is only about 10% effective in combating transmission of Omicron, right? Everybody's going to get it regardless of vaccination. So provinces are now waking up, and now leaders have said that they're going to get out of this pandemic and they're going to reopen. So I hope Trudeau now follows suit with what the provinces are doing and lifts the federal mandates now as well. So this has been a victory in some ways, right? We've garnered a lot of attention, and the provinces have responded, and hopefully Trudeau will as well.
Okay, so let's talk about this bill, because this sounds also another layer of dystopian. But there's a new bill, Bill C-36, which would actually require Canadians who post what they would call hate speech, it's a very broad term, to pay a fine of $50,000 if you post hate speech, supposedly online on social media. And this proposed legislation would take people to court over that speech, even if they're suspected of being about to post something hateful online. So it seems like an assault on free speech, especially since what is hate speech? And what is this? Is this making news at all in Canada as another, oh my gosh, they're really coming for us, government overreach?
No, this doesn't make a lot of news. And a lot of things that should be making news don't make news, because we have basically state-sponsored media here with the CBC. The coverage on a lot of these things is very the slightest, or it never shows the other side. But with this legislation in particular, it was brought last summer and it completely failed by the Liberal Party because of the violations of civil liberties and the concerns surrounding free speech. And now they want to reintroduce it, even though they've gotten so much pushback on this, because supposedly hate speech is on the rise in Canada and it's so dangerous and we have to crack down more on it. But to me, it's just kind of ironic that they want to regulate hate speech in this draconian way when Trudeau has been constantly smearing the unvaccinated and calling them racist, misogynist, people who are uneducated, people who should be barred from society, should not be able to travel and visit their loved ones in another province for Christmas, or to work in federally regulated jobs because of their vaccine status. So I'm experiencing cognitive dissonance here over these pushes to regulate hate speech when Trudeau is responsible for so much hateful rhetoric for the unvaccinated.
How do they purport to try to regulate it before it's even been said? That seems impossible.
Yeah, I have the exact same question. And this was one of the reasons why this piece of legislation failed so miserably in the first time, was because it was like, how can you ever regulate this? Like, it says that if it is suspected that somebody is going to be posting hateful content, they will be penalized in some way, financially or otherwise, or be banned from certain platforms, or their content will be taken down right away. But it's like, the internet is so big, I have no idea how they would be able to do this kind of thing.
And there's no way to decide what counts as objectively hateful and what does not. I mean, this is why we don't have hate speech as like some kind of separate category in the U.S. We're so lucky we have the First Amendment, which absolutely protects hate speech. There's no Supreme Court recognition for some category of speech that's hateful and that's not protected. Although I'll hear usually people in the progressive liberal circles saying, well, right, I support free speech, just not hate speech. And I'll be like, well, what are you talking about? Hate speech is free speech. There's no difference between the two. No one's ever came up with like, this is hate speech, this is not. It'd be practically impossible, and Canada would realize that it's practically impossible, or just that it's going to be enforced arbitrarily against stupid, like in Britain, there are cases, right, of someone posting like rap lyrics online and then getting a hate speech fine, things like that, where there's a law in the book, so you can arbitrarily crack down on, whatever, if it makes the authorities mad for any reason.
Yeah, hate speech is when people disagree with me, Rob, right? I mean, that's kind of what you were, it's kind of what you were pointing out with Trudeau could be guilty in the eyes of the people that he's assailing of hate speech, right?
Yeah, so many American people, talk to me and they're like, is this really happening in Canada? And I'm like, yeah, like this is actually happening. Like these measures are being taken. And for me, as I wrote about in my essay, it's just so remarkable how the word fascist, authoritarian, tyranny, white supremacy were so loosely used during the Trump years. Yet what's happening right now is more authoritarian, arguably, than anything Trump ever did. And I'm no Trump apologist. I was heavily critical of him and never once supported him. And I thought his presidency was disastrous in many other ways. But when it comes to government overreach, when it comes to authoritarianism, like seizing bank accounts and removing insurance of truckers and freezing the bank accounts of not just those who were involved in the protests, but those who donated to the protests. Like, this is the kind of stuff that people feared Trump would do. Yet this is kind of what's happening right here. And the media is largely silent on it because of the financial incentives, because of their ideological bias.
No doubt. Well, Rob, thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, it was great to be on. Thanks.
Thank you. So tomorrow on Rising, the Daily Poster's Andrew Perez will break down how the Supreme Court may soon end regulators' power to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. And Vermont State Senator Keisha Ram Hinsdale is here to discuss her progressive agenda and her run for House.
Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so you never miss a video, and we'll see you guys tomorrow. Bye-bye.
See you then.